Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a photographer who provides, among other services, book boudoir photography services through his company, DeMato Productions. His name is John A. DeMato, and my interview with John will follow the note-taking sounds. John DeMato, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thanks for having me, Aaron. The pleasure is all on this side of the microphone.
You founded and own DeMato Productions. What services does your company provide?
The services that my company provides is within the visual storytelling space. Specifically, what I do with my clients is help them build a visual storytelling library. And what that consists of is a variety of core assets, magic moments, and hidden details that are representative of who my clients are, who they serve, the problems they solve, and how they solve those problems. And specifically, the people that I serve are experts who speak on stages, they write books, they're in front of the room, in front of a whiteboard, training. They're coaches, they're consultants. They're people who transform the lives of those that they serve one moment at a time.
As you are a visual storytelling expert, can you elaborate a little more on what visual storytelling entails?
Sure. Visual storytelling is the strategic process of compiling the aforementioned visual storytelling library to be able to support my clients' goals of getting more clients, raising their fees, and working more often by creating content that illustrates their expertise and elevates the perception of authority in their space to those that they serve, as well as adding a layer of personality into their online presence so that they're more genuine and they're more connected to their people, which ultimately helps them create more trust in the minds of those that they want to work with.
As this podcast is mainly about books, writing, literature, and authors, developing an author brand is essential in the modern way the business of being an author gets done nowadays. Why is visual storytelling important for an important aspect of developing an author brand?
Well, it's probably because, not probably, it's definitely because regardless of what an author's area of expertise is, there's 9 million books out there that speak on the same topic, that help to solve a particular problem. Therefore, it's kind of noisy out there. There's a lot of people trying to vie for the same types of folks. As a result, visual storytelling created with intention and strategy and putting yourself out there in a genuine way and illustrating how you solve people's problems with the book, with the other aspects of an author's business, whatever that looks like, and showing people how you help them through these images and through these teachable moment stories that you share helps to cut through the noise of all the other experts in that space to be able to send a clear signal to the right types of people that these authors want to work with. So instead of just hoping and praying and crossing your fingers and knocking on wood, you're giving yourself a much better opportunity to be discovered by those who need your help the most.
How can authors develop a visual storytelling strategy for their author website, social media pages, and author brand if they've never thought about visual storytelling before?
Well, the first step is to sit back and take stock in how you're presenting yourself right now. understand where you are within the landscape of your particular space. First of all, do you recognize yourself in the photos that you're presenting? Are you showcasing the books that you actually are selling? And by that, I don't just mean do you have the two-dimensional graphics that your designer gave you of the book and putting that out there? Do you actually have tangible photos of the book, of the not just the cover and the spine either? Do you have images of the actual inside details, the section headers, the chapter titles, the illustrations, all the pull quotes, all of the different things that are within that book? Those are the hidden details that you need to share with your audience. Those are the important pieces that give them an indication of what they should expect when they buy that book. It creates more of an anticipation for them to want to buy it. And then thinking about the core assets that you have. Do you have the requisite headshots, the wider portraits on your website, in your speaker media PR kit? Do you have social profile photos that are relevant to what you look like today? And do they display the emotions and the sentiments that you want to convey to your audience? When thinking about putting together a visual storytelling strategy, it starts with intention and purpose. It starts with taking stock with where you are. And then it's understanding that you need those core assets, those headshots and portraits. You need to capture those magic moments, those book signings, the podcast interviews that you do, the behind the scenes work that you're doing, and the hidden details that are a part of your business, the book itself, other branded materials, other aspects to your business, so that you paint a very broad picture to those that you serve, that you're far more than just someone that put a book on a shelf, that you create value for people, that you want to connect with them, that you can be trusted to deliver on your promise of helping them get better than they were before.
An interesting service you provide is book boudoir photography. What is book boudoir photography, and how can book boudoir photos enhance an author's brand?
Well, I already just talked about it with you, Aaron. It's the piece about capturing the book in real life. And I can go a little further into it. I talked about the cover and the spine photos, the photos of the inside pages, and certain details. But essentially, the long story short of what a book boudoir session is allowing your audience the opportunity to preview the book in their hands through their eyes. It creates a much more tangible uh, look into what the book actually is. And the reason for having these images, as opposed to the aforementioned two-dimensional graphic of the cover, what you're looking to do is offer these details to your design team who's putting together your launch materials, so that instead of just, showing the graphic and put available on Amazon, pre-order today, and do the stuff that everybody else does, what you're doing is showing them physically what that book looks like, what those pull quotes look like, and then you're complementing those images. Even though they're two-dimensional, there is depth to these types of photos. And what you can do with that is complement those images with stories that not only give them an indication of what to expect from the book, but in many cases, a teachable moment right off the bat. So you're giving them value before they ever click the buy now button. And that will ultimately, for some, inspire them to click the buy now button or to pre-order it.
For an author, what is the right balance between polished professional photos and more candid personal visual content?
That's a good question. The balance is up to the particular author expert, meaning that for some people, it's a prerequisite that they share more of their personal life with their audience because of the very nature of their expertise. For some, it's not that important as much, but with that being said, there needs to be a certain level of back and forth between expertise driven posts, whether it's, images of them, facilitating or speaking, or, as I mentioned before, photos of them in real life, magical moments such as these book signings and other things that these authors do in their day-to-day lives to help promote their business and their services and their books. Um, but in terms of the smartphone photos, they're important because you don't always have a photographer following you around. I mean, most people don't have a personal paparazzi, right? But magical moments are still happening within their lives. As a result, based on the fact that 99.99999% of people, including business owners and author experts, have a camera at the ready on them 24/7. So when moments happen, whether they're engaging with clients or with bookstore owners or with certain types of people that are related to their business, and a moment happens, they can take that phone out and snap a photo and be able to share that moment with their audience. And it's important because it adds another layer to who they are as a person and what their life looks like. And you want people to get that sense because regardless of what your area of expertise happens to be, if you are a service business owner, you are in the business of building relationships. So just espousing, teachable moments from the mountaintop is not enough. That's important and it helps establish that credibility that I mentioned before. But what you also need is to show yourself as a human being in real life with a smartphone photo so that you're painting that broader picture.
You might have already mentioned this a little bit, but for an author, how does visual variety impact audience engagement, and why is it essential for credibility?
One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of experts make, whether it's an author, speaker, coach, consultant, whatever flavor that is that they rely on the same 3 to 5 photos and post them everywhere. Now, why is that a problem? You might say to yourself, well, these photos are amazing. I look amazing. There's a lot of emotion in these images. I look expensive. And while that may be true, what happens in the minds of the people that are following you is that you actually don't look that expensive. You look kind of cheap because you're sharing the same photos over and over. It gets really boring. But what visual variety does, with a variety of rooms that you're in, with a variety of expressions on your face, and these different core assets and these magical moments captured in the hidden details that are within your business, you're giving much more of a story, an ever evolving, never ending story on repeat. It shows people that you're current, that you're relevant, that you're doing things, that you're being hired by people just like them. And what that does is reinforce in their minds that you're in demand. And when you create that perception of demand, that immediately signals to people that you are a premium priced expert that is worth their money. Because if all of these people are bringing you in, clearly you're doing something great and they want to get a piece of it as well. So that's why it's essential to not rely on a small handful of photos, but rather build an ever evolving visual storytelling library that captures you in all of those different places in which you work with the different types of people that you work with, the before, the during, the after, the moments where you are being spotlit in one way, shape, or form, whether it's facilitating or speaking or otherwise. And that will help create that high perception of value in potential buyers.
On your company's blog, you recently wrote a blog post about how generic branding fails. Why does generic personal branding fail? And I think you might have already answered this question to some extent.
Well, well, Aaron, here's the thing. When we're talking about generic branding, what we're talking about is stock photography, right? That's the primary piece. Stock photography checks a box. There's no doubt about that. The problem is it's the wrong box. It's it's photos that other experts are using. It's of actors portraying what it looks like in terms of, what your world looks like. It's not your world. It's not you. It's not the emotion or the perception that you want to create in their minds based off of you, the people that you serve, the people you work with to serve those people, and the moments that happen in your life. So if you're leading with stock photography, you're already off the wrong foot because you're not giving people a really true look into what they can expect when they hire you. And one of the benefits of creating a genuine visual storytelling library with intention and strategy is that you're helping your audience clearly visualize what it's like to be in the room with you. And when you do that, that helps create that friction of, wow, I need to get on this person's calendar and learn more about how they can help me because it's demystifying the whole process. You're showing them what it looks like. You're not telling them what it looks like, and you're not showing it through generic photos that have absolutely nothing to do with your business, your brand, your personality. So, generic photography, generic branding is definitely not the way to go if you're looking to get yourself on a growth trajectory, scale your business, and look to make more money and get more clients and work more often.
You've mentioned a couple of failure points, different types of failure points for uh, a, a visual storytelling part of an author brand. But what are some of the biggest and most common mistakes people tend to make when actually taking the photos that are meant to represent their personal brand, whether it be as an author or some other type of expert?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes that experts make is that they feel the need to pose in front of the camera to articulate their body and their face in a certain way that they feel that their audience wants to see them as. And that could not be further from the truth. What you, what many experts do is they treat their core asset session, their branding session, as if it were a fashion or a beauty shoot. And that is not the way to approach this. You need to work with a photographer to position yourself in natural poses, whether you're looking into the camera for a headshot or a wider portrait, or you're being captured during a candid lifestyle photo. For example, if you're working on a laptop and showing people what your research process looks like, what your general work process looks like. What does it look like when you're reading an email? What are you doing with your hands? Are you leaning on your hands? Are you leaning on the side of one hand? Do you have your hands on the side of the table? Those kinds of things. When you're typing, where's the laptop? Is it on a table? Is it in your lap mostly? Is it go both ways? Like, what does that look like? And then when you position yourself in those kinds of natural poses, you then allow the photographer to be able to optimize, not position, but optimize what you're doing in front of that camera naturally so that you are able to look at that photo afterwards and say to yourself, I recognize that person. And when you're able to recognize what you look like in the photo yourself, number one, you're more apt to want to share that photo. But just as importantly, you're giving your audience a genuine look into who you are and how you present yourself. And these are small little details, but they prevent the photos from feeling artificial, from feeling as if, oh wow, they took some great shots in that session. Now, obviously, everyone knows they could tell the difference between something that's happening in a real moment versus a recreated moment in a core asset session. But when you position yourself naturally, that question doesn't even come up. It just feels as though the camera's a fly on the wall capturing that moment. So that's something very important to keep in mind for everyone listening to this before their next branding session.
One final question. Do you plan on or are you considering writing one or more books? And if so, what are some ideas you have for books that you will or may write in the future?
I do not have any designs on writing any books. Um, but if I were to write a book, it would revolve around the impact and power of an intentional and strategic visual storytelling library and the influence of genuine images on helping those you serve to uh, understand the value that you bring to the table and how it creates a tension in the minds of those that could potentially be in your world hiring you for different things. I mean, around the psychology of visuals and why, how we make meaning as human beings through visuals more so than words or through audio. Visual is the strongest sense when it comes to uh, making meaning of moments. So it would probably be around something like that. I'd probably hire some kind of a survey group to run a study and get some real numbers around all of this and build a book around that type of a story, that type of a objective.
John, you are of great service to the writing community. You have been an amazing guest for this podcast, and I thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
And I appreciate you for having me. Thanks.
If and when John decides to write a book, I wish him well on that endeavor, and it was wonderful to interview John about author branding. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.